The Carolina Panthers were supposed to fade into the background this season, yet here they are playing in games that feel like season changers in late November. A team that was once talked about as a long rebuild has stacked wins over Atlanta, Miami, Dallas, and Green Bay, put up 30-27 in an overtime thriller, and suddenly everyone is asking the same question. Are the Panthers actually building something real, or is this just a streak that can disappear as fast as it showed up? Nobody expected this group to walk into a Monday night spotlight with real playoff stakes attached, but that is exactly where Carolina is standing right now. The wild part is how different this team can look from week to week. One Sunday, you see Bryce Young ripping the ball all over the field for 448 yards and 3 touchdowns, looking totally in control. The next week, you watch a 20-9 loss where the offense stalls, the play calling feels off, and every drive feels like a struggle. Fans are living on a roller coaster with this team because you never know which version of the Panthers offense is going to show up. What nobody is talking about enough is that this is not just about one young quarterback. It is about how the entire team handles pressure when the nation is watching and the division is still up for grabs. That is what makes this season feel so important for Bryce Young, for head coach Dave Canales, and for a roster that now includes added help like Brandon Cooks, depth pieces like Chris Barnes, and a defense that is fighting every week to give them a chance. When Rico and Chuba Hubbard are rolling, the line is holding up, and the defense led by players like J.C. Horn is taking the ball away, the Panthers look like a group that belongs in the NFC South race deep into the winter. But here is the twist that will decide everything. Is this offense built around a tough run game that controls the tempo, or are they trying to become a pass-heavy team that leans on Bryce Young to do it all even when it backfires? How Carolina answers that question on offense is where the real story begins. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Panthers and all the NFL content. Let's aim for 200 likes on this video. The Carolina Panthers offense steps on the field every week, caught between two very different identities, and that tension shows up on every big drive. On one side, you have a tough, physical run attack built around Rico and Chuba Hubbard, backs who can keep the chains moving and wear down a defense when they actually get the football. On the other side, you see long stretches where the ball lives in the hands of Bryce Young, even in short yard spots where a simple handoff could settle things down. What nobody is talking about enough is how often this team drifts away from what it does best and invites trouble by trying to be something else. You can feel it most on those third and short calls when the game is still close and the stadium is holding its breath. Instead of trusting the line and letting Rico or Chuba Hubbard punch forward behind their blocks, the call shifts to quick passes into tight windows that put all the pressure on Bryce Young. When it works, everyone nods and moves on, but when it fails, the drive dies. The defense has to jog right back onto the field, and the whole flow of the game tilts. This is where the vision of head coach Dave Canales matters so much, because his choices decide whether Carolina leans into a balanced attack with play action and rhythm, or slips into a pass-heavy style that leaves no margin for error. The strange part is that we have already seen how dangerous this offense can look when the run game is featured early, screens slow down the rush, and play action gives Bryce Young clean reads in the middle of the field. Those stretches do not feel like a fluke. They feel like the blueprint, yet they show up one week and vanish the next. That is why the next big question is not just about formations or play sheets. It is about how Bryce Young himself handles being at the center of two competing visions. Is he the calm point guard of a balanced attack, or is he being asked to turn into a constant hero with the ball in his hands on every key snap? The answer to that will define everything that comes next. The Carolina Panthers handed Bryce Young the keys to their franchise, yet some nights it feels like two completely different quarterbacks show up in the same jersey. At his best, he looks like the calm star Carolina thought it was drafting with the first pick, ripping timing throws in rhythm and turning the field into a chessboard that he controls. You saw that version when he dropped 448 yards and 3 touchdowns on Atlanta, when he led late drives against Dallas and Miami, when he kept the offense moving with quick strikes to Tetairoa McMillan, who is a rookie, Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette, JT Sanders, and Tommy Tremble. In those games, he looks light on his feet, confident with his reads, And fans walk away thinking this is the guy who can stand next to names like Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson one day. Then there is the other version of Bryce Young, the one Panthers fans saw in that 20-9 loss where every throw felt a half second off. That version holds the ball too long, fires early on some routes, arrives late on others, and struggles to find clean windows over the middle where taller quarterbacks live. Because of his size, passes at the line get tipped when defenders simply put their hands up, and he is forced into sidearm angles just to get the ball around traffic. When you pull away the wild shootouts and look at the rest of the year, you see stretches where he is sitting around 141 yards a game, and that is tough to square with the price Carolina paid to move up and pass on CJ Stroud to make him their guy. None of this means he is a lost cause, but it does show how thin the line is between a sharp performance and a long, slow night. What makes this even more interesting is that the gap between those two versions of Bryce Young is not only about arm talent, it is about trust, confidence, and how fast he sees the field. When he believes what he sees and lets it rip early, the offense breathes, and the ball finds his playmakers in stride, and he can even steal easy yards with his legs when the defense forgets about him. When doubt creeps in, he passes up rushing lanes in the red zone, forces tight window throws, and turns scoring chances into turnovers or field goals. The question now is whether Bryce Young can lock in that aggressive, clear-minded version of himself for most of the season, and whether Dave Canales can build a plan that keeps him in that comfort zone instead of dragging him back into chaos, because that is where the spotlight on this coaching staff really starts to heat up. Every time the Carolina Panthers step into a primetime moment, the camera finds Bryce Young, but the decisions coming from the sideline put head coach Dave Canales right next to him in the spotlight. Fans watched that game plan against San Francisco and felt like the rhythm of the offense never really settled, from early series where the drive stalled to late situations where the strategy felt rushed. Timeouts, clock use, and the choice of plays in key spots all added up to a night where the team looked out of sync, even while the defense was handing them extra chances. It was the kind of performance that reminds everyone that in this league, the person calling the plays can make a solid roster look either sharp or shaky. You saw that tension show up most in the way scoring chances were handled. In the red zone, routes bunched into the same patch of grass left Bryce Young throwing into traffic instead of clear space, and on that crucial interception near the goal line, he had room to tuck the ball and run, but the design pushed him toward a tight throw. Then came the choice to chase a 2-point try after a penalty on special teams, instead of taking the extra point and living with steady math. Those are not moments that define Canales as a bad coach, but they are moments where small choices turn possible points into nothing, and that is brutal in a close game against a heavyweight. When these little decisions pile up, they change how the entire offense feels about each drive. What makes this story so fascinating is that we have already seen Canales build sharp, creative plans in earlier weeks, using motion, screens, and a committed ground attack to lift Rico, Chuba Hubbard, and Bryce Young at the same time. That proves the ideas are there, which puts even more weight on whether he can bring that same clarity every single week, not just in select matchups. Across from him, you see coaches like Kyle Shanahan calmly leaning on long drives and patient calls, and Panther fans want to know if their own sideline can match that kind of control. Because if the person designing this offense can consistently tap into the best version of his quarterback, then the spotlight will shift toward the players around Bryce Young, and whether this supporting cast is already strong enough to carry Carolina through the rest of this season. Quietly, the Carolina Panthers have built an offense that looks very different from the one fans suffered through not long ago, and that changes how we should look at Bryce Young. On the outside, you now have Tedero McMillan, a rookie who already looks like a future star with size and body control that can take over big moments. Alongside him are Jalen Coker as a steady chain mover, Xavier Legette still growing into his role, and veteran Brandon Cooks, who brings real experience in big games. Add in tight ends JT Sanders and Tommy Tremble as reliable targets in the middle, and it becomes clear this is not a bare cupboard situation. There are real options on every level of the field. Up front, the story has changed as well. Left tackle Ika Mekwonu has settled in as a force on the edge. Lewis has been a stable piece on the interior. Behind that group, Rico and Chuba Hubbard give Carolina a 1-2 punch on the ground that can control tempo when they are featured the right way. This is not about trying to survive with a broken line and one playmaker. It is about taking a well-rounded group and squeezing every ounce out of it through smart use of personnel and clear roles for each player. All of that investment sends a clear message. The front office believes that with the right structure around Bryce Young, this team should be able to move the ball on anyone and help their quarterback grow without forcing him to carry everything alone. That is why the next part of the story is so important. While the offense is searching for that perfect balance between run and pass, there is a unit on the other side of the ball that has already been playing good enough to win, stealing possessions and keeping games close. The real question now is whether this improving defense can keep holding the line while the offense figures out how to match their level. The Carolina Panthers defense keeps answering every challenge, yet they are often walking off the field with nothing to show for it. In that spotlight game against the 49ers, they picked off Brock Purdy 3 times and still had to watch the scoreboard stay stuck on single digits for their own offense. Drives that start in plus territory are supposed to turn into touchdowns or at least easy field goals, but too many of those chances ended without points. You can feel how frustrating that must be for a group that keeps creating sudden change moments and then has to jog right back out there after another short possession. What makes their effort even more impressive is how much they have grown compared to last season when stopping the run felt like a weekly problem. Now you see defenders holding their ground for long stretches before the snap counts and time of possession catch up in the fourth quarter. Gibson has stepped in and given quality snaps in the rotation. Mike Jackson has nearly added more takeaways on top of the interceptions already in the books, and J.C. Horn has been a tone setter in coverage whenever he is healthy enough to be on the field. When a corner like J.C. Horn goes down again in a physical game, it highlights how hard this unit is fighting through injuries while still keeping games within reach. The deeper truth is that no defense can carry a season alone, no matter how many times players in this group flip the field. Long opening drives, sudden swings, and late breakdowns all trace back to one simple reality. If the offense cannot stay on the field, this defense will always be asked to do too much. That is why the next stretch on the schedule is going to be so revealing. As Carolina lines up against one contender after another in the NFC, we are going to find out whether this defense keeps playing at a playoff level while the offense and Bryce Young try to match their standard, or whether the weight of that schedule finally becomes too heavy for one side of the ball to carry. The NFC South is not supposed to run through the Carolina Panthers, yet the schedule in front of them might quietly decide who grabs control of this race. In a short span, they have to walk into San Francisco on Monday night, come back to face a sharp Rams team with Sean McVay, deal with a New Orleans group that has always made life tricky for Bryce Young, battle a physical Seattle squad at home, and then close with 2 huge meetings against Tampa Bay. That is not just a tough stretch. That is a measuring stick run where every mistake gets punished and every win changes how the whole conference views this team. Nobody expected Carolina to be in this type of conversation so soon, which makes every snap in these games feel bigger than the one before. Inside the division, the picture is even more delicate. The Buccaneers are sitting at the top, but Baker Mayfield is managing an AC sprain in his non-throwing shoulder, and that could swing momentum if his play dips at the wrong time. New Orleans still has playmakers on both sides of the ball, and even if Atlanta is sliding, the Panthers already know that beating a familiar opponent twice is harder than people admit. With a late bye still on the horizon and 3 of the last 4 games coming inside the division, Carolina is not just fighting for a wildcard spot. They are chasing direct tiebreakers that will decide who is still playing meaningful football when the calendar flips. One misstep can erase a big upset win, but one surprise victory can flip the entire division math in their favor. That is why these coming weeks are about more than record or style points. They are about answering the question every fan keeps asking in the back of their mind. Can Bryce Young and Dave Canales take this group from a fun story into a steady threat that shows up the same way every Sunday? The schedule will not wait for anyone, and this stretch will expose whether Carolina can handle real pressure or if the old up and down pattern returns at the worst possible time. To survive that run, they cannot just hope for big plays or lucky breaks. They need a clear idea of what consistency actually looks like for their quarterback, their play caller, and this entire locker room. And that is where the heart of this story really lives. For Bryce Young, consistency begins before the ball is even snapped. It looks like stable footwork, clear decisions in the first seconds of every play, and a willingness to take the simple throw on time instead of searching for the perfect highlight. It is hitting Tetairoa McMillan, the rookie on rhythm routes on first down, finding Tommy Tremble or JT Sanders quickly on second down, and using his legs in smart moments when the middle of the field opens up. It is stacking games where he lives around clean completion numbers, avoids risky passes into crowded windows, and lets his playmakers handle the heavy lifting after the catch. When that version of Bryce Young becomes the normal Sunday picture, the talk around him changes from questions about his size to respect for how he controls a game. For Dave Canales, consistency means that Carolina walks into every matchup with an identity that never wavers. It is trusting Rico and Chuba Hubbard to set the tone on the ground, building a script of early touches for players like Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette, and Brandon Cooks, and keeping third down calls simple and physical instead of risky and complicated. It shows in red zone designs that create clear space for Bryce Young to either fire or keep the ball, not throw into traffic. It shows in patient clock control when the defense is tired, and in steady choices on extra points and field goals that protect the team from chasing numbers. When that steady hand becomes a weekly habit, the offense stops feeling like it is guessing and starts to look like it knows exactly who it is. For the rest of the Panthers, consistency looks like every unit lifting the same way as that standard rises. The offensive line keeps communication sharp so protection does not break down in big moments. The receivers fight through contact to give Bryce Young clear windows. And the defense with leaders like J.C. Horn continues to hunt for takeaways without needing to play perfect every drive. The front office can still look for a stronger veteran backup than Andy Dalton to push the room, not as a threat, but as a challenge that sharpens everyone. If Carolina reaches a point where the box score is less about one wild outburst and more about solid production across the roster each week, then this season becomes more than a short run. It becomes the start of a new standard, and the real tension is whether they can hold that level when the next wave of high-pressure games arrives.